It took me going to prison for 24 years to make me who I am. You're forced to face those demons that you let loose in your past. After 15 years of running from God, as fast and as far away as I could, when I turned around, I found him just one step behind me. My name is Ryan West. I'm 46 years old. I live in Huntsville, Texas. I haven't always lived here. In fact, when I was growing up, I lived all over the country. California, Texas, Minnesota, Ohio. So I took a rather tortured path to get here. My earliest memory that I can remember was when I was about 3 years old. And it involved sexual abuse. We were at a surprise birthday party, and we rehearsed our hiding places over and over again. And my place to hide was behind the couch. And the teenage daughter hid with me, and that's where she sexually abused me. And throughout different places in the house throughout the day. From that time forward, it seemed like no matter where we went, no matter where we moved, there was always someone there or multiple someones there that would sexually abuse me. It got to the point to where I thought that it was normal. We would move someplace and there would always be someone there that would get to know me, that would give me gifts, spend time with me, give me that acceptance that I was looking for, that approval that I was looking for. Looking back on it, it was all to manipulate me, to get me into a safe spot to where they could sexually abuse me. So sex was just a natural part of my life. I had normalized it due to my past experiences. So in my way of thinking, as long as no one got hurt, then that was okay. When I was 15 years old, an opportunity presented itself, and I continued that cycle by becoming an abuser myself. Years later, down the road in my early 20s, the downside of a failed military career and a very ugly divorce, the victim of my crime made an outcry. And there was a trial. It lasted 5 days, and at the end of those 5 days, I was sentenced to 30 years aggravated in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. That was in 1999. So the first unit I hit when I went to prison was the Ferguson unit, and it's known as a gladiator farm. This was 20 some odd years ago, and Ferguson was a very violent place. It was run by gangs, and everything in prison is based on race. So when I got to prison, I was still looking for that acceptance, still looking for that approval, so I fell right into that. I found acceptance, not in healthy ways, but in very unhealthy ways, and fell right in with a security threat group, what the rest of the world might call a prison gang, and quickly climbed up the ranks in prison. Prison was, like I said, a dirty place, a violent place, and I was capable of being violent. And I did what I needed to do, impress the right people. They invited me to prospect. For that particular gang, I did, and within very short order, I became a sergeant and then a junior lieutenant in that gang. And I ran the general population side of that farm for about 2 years. We engaged in what you would imagine a prison gang would engage in. There was a riot that took place on close custody rec yard. It was a staged riot to get the officers onto the rec yard. And when the officers came onto the rec yard, everybody just stopped fighting. And they surrounded those officers. And we said, look, these things need to start happening. Because if they don't happen, the next time this is going to be for real. Prison gangs are such a predominant problem in places like Ferguson Unit. that they have gang intelligence officers there. And their role is to identify who the members are of what they call a tier 1 gang, a high-level gang. And when they're able to identify those members, they will place them in solitary confinement for an indefinite amount of time. So everybody tried to fly under the radar that was involved in those tier 1 gangs. But after the riot, then that kind of put me on the radar of this gang intelligence officer. She began to ask questions to the other inmates about who is Ryan West? Who is Ryan West with? And prison is like a fishbowl. Now, you can try to keep your life private, but there's just no way to do that. So within about a year of me being a member of this gang, she was able to determine that I was indeed a member of this gang. And because I was a member of this gang, she sent paperwork off to Huntsville. I was confirmed and placed into solitary confinement. And that's where I remained for 10 years. It was a bit of a culture shock, for sure, because you're in your cell 23 hours a day. I was used to being alone, though. I had felt that I'd been alone all my life. So it was, in a way, it was kind of like a relief to be by myself, to have my own space, to be isolated. I was okay with that for a while. But the thing about solitary confinement is there's only so much working out you can do. There's only so many books you can read, so many magazines you can read, so many staring at the wall that you can do before you're just left with your own thoughts, before you begin to turn inward. You're forced to face those demons that you let loose in your past. And I slowly began to realize, and it didn't happen overnight, it took time, it took years for me to realize that this is not where I need to be. In 2008, I stepped away from the gang because I'd seen enough to know that it was a lie. So I had sent a letter to the gang intelligence officer and began to disassociate myself from that gang. And once again, I found myself alone. I found myself without that approval, without that acceptance. When they removed me from the gang, they moved me from the cell that I was in, away from the gang members, to another place. And the place that I was in, there were a lot of Christians there. And we had a lot of conversations about God. And even though deep down I believed in God, I wouldn't profess it with my mouth at that time. I would argue with them, but God can't be real. There's no way that Christianity is viable in today's world. Several years after I had left the gang, I was on what they call the night shift. So I would get up at about 8 p.m. and I would go to sleep at about noon. And I would spend my time during that time either working out or reading or listening to the radio. And there was really nothing on the radio that I cared to listen to one particular night. So I was on a local rock station. And one of my favorite songs came on. And as I sit there and listen to it, I was looking out my cell door, looking out the expanded metal on my cell front. And I thought to myself, what am I doing here? Why am I sitting here at 3 a.m. on my bunk, looking out a prison door? What's wrong with me? Not only could I not do life right, because here I am in prison. You can't even do prison right, man. You're sitting here in solitary confinement. What's wrong with me? Why can't I get this right? Why is it in my entire life I'm always having problems? It was that night that I did something that I hadn't done in 15 years. I got down on my knees and I prayed to God. And I can still remember the prayer that I prayed to God. I said, God, I don't even know if you're real. And if you are real, I don't know if you can hear me. And if you can hear me, I don't even know if you care. But if you are real, if you can't hear me, if you do care, my mind is ready, my heart is ready, so show me. And God showed me in very short order that, number one, he was real. Number two, he did hear me. And number three, he cared more than I could imagine. That next morning, I pulled out just a regular sheet of paper and I drew a line right down the center of it from top to bottom. And on one side of the paper, I entitled it, What I Believe. And on the other side of the paper, I entitled it, Why I Believe These Things. And so I had all these things that I believed in, this very carefully constructed worldview. When it came time to list why I believed in these things, I came to the realization that I didn't have a lot of good reasons for believing in all the things that I believed in. So I began to search for the truth. I began to search for something more substantial. Because here I am, everything that I believed in, I had just torn to pieces. The platform that I was standing on, it was just shattered. When I asked God to show me that he was real, and to show me that he could hear me, to show me that he cared, he did that in very short order. So I prayed to God. I said, God, would you reconnect me with my sister, who I hadn't spoken with in 5 years due to an argument that we'd had while I was in prison? And will you reconnect me to a friend of mine? And we hadn't spoken for years either. It couldn't have been just a coincidence. But before that week was out, I had a letter from both of them just telling me, hey, I just wanted to reach out to you. I just wanted to connect with you. I miss you. I want to talk to you. So that was the first inkling that I got, the first proof that I got, like God has to prove to me anything. But it was the first proof that I got that, God is listening to me. When I got out of solitary confinement, I was assigned to the WIN unit here in Huntsville, Texas. And the second or third day I was there, I was walking around the rec yard, and I heard my name called. Not my name, but my gang name. And I thought, oh God, here we go. But when I turned around, there was a friendly face that I knew. And at some point I noticed that he had a medallion on his neck. And I'm Catholic, I know about this stuff, right? I said, what is that, a St. Christopher or St. Michael medallion? And he said, no, it's a St. Dismas medallion. Oh, maybe I'm not so Catholic, I don't know who this guy is. But he explained him to me. He explained who St. Dismas was. He was the patron saint of prisoners. He was the one crucified with Christ, that through all of his pain, through all of his suffering, he was able to notice God right beside him and profess him from his mouth. And because of that, he was saved. And oh, by the way, Ryan, we've got a Brothers of St. Dismas retreat coming up. Do you want to go? There'll be food, there'll be fun, there'll be this and that. I said, well, yeah, that sounds good. He said, okay, well, it's going to be a 3-day lockdown in the chapel. I said, no, I'm out. 3 days in the chapel? Are you kidding me? No way. He said, well, let's think about it, pray about it. It's about a month or two away, so just pray about it and think about it. So every time he would see me, he would ask me, hey, did you drop an I-60? Or did you send in a request to be placed on the list to be the BSD retreat? No, man, I forgot. No, I'll do it next week. Had all these excuses up until the week of the retreat. And Frankie just says, hey, listen, it's probably too late, but I'm going to go ahead and see if I can't get you put on the list anyway. So I'm thinking to myself, yeah, fat chance of that. List has already been approved and signed off by the warden, no way. So I went home, and sure enough, on Thursday night, they brought me a lay-in, which is a notification that you have an appointment the next day. And that notification for the appointment was for the BSD retreat. The retreat started on a Friday. And when I first went to that retreat, I didn't want to be there. By Sunday, I didn't want to leave. I'd never experienced anything like that. Nothing in my life had prepared me for a love that was just so unrelentless as God's love. And I felt it there at that place. And, after 15 years of running from God, as fast and as far away as I could, when I turned around, I found him just one step behind me, arms wide open. But it's a step that he wouldn't take. It's a step that God wants us to take of our own free will because God is love. So from that moment on, it was just pedal to the metal. I began to devour everything I could that was Catholic. I began to read all the books that I could on Catholicism, the early church fathers. It was the intellectual depth of Catholicism that first drew me to the tradition. Augustine, I moved on to Aquinas and Bonaventure, Benedict XVI. Began to read all of these. Francis de Sales eventually led me to John of the Cross, who eventually led me to Teresa of Avila, who eventually led me to the Blessed Virgin Mother, who led me in closer relationship to Christ. When I got out of prison, life is very fast out here. A lot's changed in 24 years. So I was involved with the Brothers of St. Dismas for about 10 years in various positions. And when I had made parole, I wanted to continue to be a part of BSD. And it actually took me about 2.5 years after I made parole to get out of prison. And one of the main reasons was because of my offense, there's very limited places that I can go. And I met a bunch of people that were in the same situation as me. So one of the ideas that we had upon my release was to build this monastic type of community for individuals to transition to, regardless of what their charge was. But it would offer a Catholic atmosphere, because one of the largest problems when guys get out is they have a strong faith, they have a good understanding, but when they get out, they're thrown in these places to where there's no Catholic influence, and they so easily go back to what they knew before just to meet their basic needs. It took me going to prison for 24 years to make me who I am. Looking back on my life, throughout my life, I see God everywhere. But God's love is a relentless love, a one that just pursues you. And he won't give up on you, even if you give up on yourself. That's God's love. And I see that throughout my life, from just the people that God puts in my life, when I most need those people, to the happy coincidences that just let me know that, yeah, I'm real. I can hear you. And yeah, I care. And I see that everywhere now. In the littlest things that I don't chalk up to just coincidence anymore. But those are moments in my life that can only be explained by God being God. And while there's parts of me I don't like, while there's parts of me that I know I need to change, I'm happy with who I am now. I'm happy with the man I've become. And yeah, there's room for improvement. But I learned something years ago, and that is that God loves me now as much as God is ever going to love me.
Ten years of sharing the peace of Christ. Shalom World, God's own channel.